Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon and welcome to NICE International Conference on Understanding China. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank which believes in freedom, democracy, and a world free from conflict. We envision a world where sources of insecurity are identified and understood, conflict are prevented or resolved, and peace is advocated. Today's conference is organized under China Study Center. China study uh, as a whole brings into perspective and rising power mounting economic, military, and diplomatic cloud that certainly has the aptitude to either overturn or sustain the current contemporary world order. The China study broadly examines China's international strategy, thinking, and conduct, foreign and security policies, and the impact of domestic politics and economy on China's foreign relations. It further addresses China's emergence in the face of the world in flux, domestic politics, economy, society, culture, People's Liberation Army, and Tibet Autonomous Region, and most importantly, her engagement with each of South Asian countries. The conference has 26 scholars from 19 countries across 5 continents. There are 4 sessions. This is the second session, which is being broadcasted live on YouTube channel, NICE Nepal. Please subscribe and share it on your social media as well. We are yet to be joined by our moderator, so I'll continue with that. Let me start with the first speaker for today. The first speaker for today is Dr. Minhas Majeed Khan. She is professor and chairperson at Department of International Relations, University of Peshawar, Pakistan, and she will be speaking on China-Pakistan bilateral relations and impact on the region. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Pramod Jaswal. Hello, everyone. I hope you all are keeping safe. It is a pleasure to be amongst you and speaking on a very important subject that has remained of interest not only for the regional countries but also stood with Pakistan. In testing times, there have been wars between, I would say, within the region, within the South Asian region between India and Pakistan, for example, 65 and 71. And obviously, it was China which helped Pakistan during those difficult times. Both countries always tried to make stronger their relations through different geopolitical, strategic, and economic projects, agreements, etc. And CPAC, as you all know, is one of the key to make strong economic relations between Pakistan and China, and is considered as a center of their relations. And as you know, it has drawn the attention of other regional actors as well. And I would say global actors as well, and specifically United States, as it has enjoyed very important role in South Asian region since the end of Second World War. The frequent exchange of visits between the head of the states and other officials of both Pakistan and China has given the a big stimulus to strengthen ties between both the countries, whereas signing mutual agreements to benefit each other. These visits have helped both states to come closer to each other, and this reflects a strong and deep commitment and understanding of both the countries as far as bilateral relations are concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very important to note that within a short span of time, The turning point in the relation was due to Chinese construction of Karakoram Highway. Later on, its interest in construction of Gwadar Port, establishment of Chashma nuclear reactor, construction of various dams in Pakistan. Furthermore, investment in Pakistan's infrastructure, sectors like energy, agriculture, banking, railways, space, commercial and health projects, heavy engineering, IT, mining, and defense industry. All these reflect commitment, sincerity, and cordiality of this bilateral relationship between Pakistan and China. Now, most academics as well as experts of China and Pakistan relations, and specifically within Pakistan, I would say they believe that the strengthening ties between China and Pakistan were due to various factors. For example, India-China War of 1962, India-US defense ties, as well as strategic partnership, Sino-Russian rift during the Cold War. However, they are now coming closer to each other on various issues, regional and global issues after 9/11. Chinese conflict with Japan over the island issue, and Indian buildup of Blue Navy in the Indian Ocean. India ties with the countries of South Asian, East Asian region, and Indian encirclement through of China through US and Japan. Given this changing security scenario in the region, China engaged with Pakistan not only diplomatically and economically, but also militarily. Additionally, the factors that have shaped Pakistan-China defense cooperations are various. For example, India as a regional hegemon, it is playing a role of policeman within South Asian region. SAARC is one example that has, as an organization, failed because of the India and Pakistan dispute over Kashmir and Indian hegemonious stand or stance towards different countries, end of Cold War and realignment in the region, South Asian region. Then Indian rising influence not only in Southeast Asia but also South Asia with the help and encouragement of US and Japan, as I said. The policy of containment of China, again with the help of its allies, specifically United States. So both countries are trying to bring peace and prosperity in region, not only for the benefit and advantage of the region, but for their own countries as well. Because after 9/11, if we see regionally and globally, each and every country has been faced by terrorism and extremism. And both countries are, in a way, contributing to curb the menace of terrorism and extremism of all shades. So this all-weather friendship has positive impact on the region, because in international relations, we see economic and political ties dependent on each other. When two countries are economically benefiting each other, despite having political disputes, so for economic benefit of each other, the countries would set aside their political issues. And later on, at one point of time, it may happen that they resolve that political issue through their strengthen economic ties. So this is the case with China and Pakistan role within the region as well. Because if we see at China foreign policy, it is a state which has created balance of power in South Asia in order to maintain peace and security in the region. Though the US is trying to escalate its influence in the region, but rising power, China as a rising power is seen as a hurdle in curtailing that influence of United States. Similarly, China is strengthening in its relations with Pakistan, and this has been seen by India and US as China attempt to extend its influence to South Asia, and most of the time it is termed by both US and India as imperialism. Whereas seen on the other hand, Indo-US relations are becoming stronger also day by day, and signing of various pact and civil and nuclear deal between both the states probably surely would make the situation vulnerable in the already vulnerable South Asian region. And it is China which can play an active and pivotal role for the development and economic development of the region through projects like CPAC. As I mentioned before, China is a major player for maintaining balance of power in the region through its economic policies. Its foreign policy toward South Asia consists of state-to-state relations with 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which are non-interference, mutual trust, confidence, and understanding and respect of sovereignty of independent states. China's bigger interest at this point of time in South Asia is economic interest. To all South Asian states, China is a big donor, and particularly for Pakistan, keeping in view their historical relationship with each other. So Chinese role and interest in shaping the regional security order are interesting. Geo-economics instruments are being employed to achieve geostrategic objectives in a region, which, as I already said, is already marked by conflict and instability. Premier Li Qiang, I would mention him here, he emphasis on restoring peace and stability was a clear indication of the Chinese policy of pursuing stability in regional politics. Beijing thus has a vital stake in maintaining peace and stability in the region, particularly between India and Pakistan. However, India has not been receptive to Chinese connectivity and the regional integration initiative due to core concerns on sovereignty and territorial integrity. Within the region, South Asian region, as member of SAARC organization, Afghanistan's security situation is not hidden from any one of us. It has been steadily declining since 2014, when a large number of international forces began to withdraw from the country. CPAC in this regard will enable Afghanistan businessmen and investors to access enormous consumer markets in South Asia and other regions. And when there is economic stability in the country, that help in reducing conflicts and instability in any country. So CPAC has created a situation which, if adeptly managed, could be instrumental in economic integration of South Asian region, where Nepal and other regional countries will surely benefit. Uh, Similarly, if we see China extending its hand of friendship, economic support to other countries, its recent move to build four-nation coalition with Nepal, Pakistan, and Afghanistan has also remained, is also a matter of concern for not only India but other major powers as well. However, this regional bloc has been established for mutual cooperation on various issues of uh, mutual concern. The support that China and Pakistan give each other is considered significant in global diplomacy, and both the countries interestingly have compared their relationship to United States and Israel relations. And it was when confronted by US officials, when China was confronted by US officials about its uncompromising support for Pakistan, Chinese journal Zhang Guangkai famously said that Pakistan is China's Israel. And this shows the mutual understanding and respect for each other, and how they view each other importance in regional and global politics. I would end here, and I would be happy to answer any questions the audience may have. And with that, I thank you all for having patience to listen to me.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. Our moderator for today has joined. Our moderator for today is Dr. Jabin Thomas Jacob. Dr. Jacob is Associate Professor at Department of International Relations and Governance Studies at Shiv Nadar University, India, and Adjunct Research Fellow at National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi. He was formerly Fellow and Assistant Director at Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi, and Associate Editor of Journal China Report. Dr. Jacob holds a PhD in Chinese Studies from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and he has spent time in Taiwan, France, and Singapore for research. His research interests include Chinese domestic politics, China-South Asia relations, Sino-Indian border issues, India-China worldviews, and center-province relations in China. He is a regular speaker at various other Indian defense training institutions. Dr. Jacob's latest publication is co-edited volume with Huang He-an titled China's Search for National Rejuvenation, Domestic and Foreign Policy under Xi Jinping, which was published by Palgrave Macmillan in 2020. Dr. Jacob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pramod, and thank you to NIICE. First of all, my apologies. In this online age, I suppose such mistakes are inevitable. I got my time wrong. My apologies, especially to Dr. Khan, Minhas Majeed Khan, for missing at least the first part of a presentation. I was really looking forward to this because I am personally quite interested in China-Pakistan relations myself. But I'm sure we'll have some questions that will bring me up to speed. So with that short apology, which is insufficient, I'd agree, but with that apology, nevertheless, let me quickly turn over to Dr. Pittaya Suvakunta, Associate Professor at the Thammasat University, Thailand, who's going to be talking to us about China's rising in ASEAN and its impact on geopolitics and geo-economics. The instructions are already clear. Pramod has been very, very precise in his instructions, so I'm sure I don't have to do anything except keep time. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Suvakunta.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Okay, I use PowerPoint. Yes, okay, thank you. Can you see? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Can you just put it on the screen?
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Pittaya Suvakunta from Thammasat University, Thailand. The topic of the China rising in ASEAN and its impact on geopolitics and geo-economics. I divided okay, I can use. Okay, thank you very much. My presentation into 6 parts. You can see from the overview, introduction, reservation, concept, and theory, determining an attitude, policy of ASEAN to China, and cooperation between ASEAN and China, and conclusion. The first part is introduction. According to the rise of China in 31st century in emerging as an economic power of the world. Third Xiaoping era open policy in 1979. China as forecast for modernization in terms of agriculture, economic, science and technology, and military. And Jiang Zemin era had a policy go to ASEAN and go to GMS. GMS is Thai, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. China want go to in the Greater Mekong sub-region. And the next, Hu Jintao had a policy called out policy in 31. And next, Jiang Zemin as a policy China Dream Belt and Road Initiative, AIB, made in China version 2050. The policy of reform and opening less repeat economic growth in China, and China has become one of economic power in the world. The concept of go-out strategy, the policy of China. China want to promote outward investment and to establish support system was included in 10 and 12 5-year plan, 2001 and 2010. China want to investment in Laos, in Myanmar, in Cambodia, but now China the top investor in Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar, and Thailand. China want go to invest in ASEAN. And the next, China in the Xi Jinping era, China have support China Dream, one Belt, one Road, or Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, ASEAN Infrastructure Investment Bank, Silk Road Fund. China want to support investment for infrastructure in ASEAN, in Laos, in Vietnam, in Myanmar, in Malaysia, Indonesia. China want to foreign aid in Southeast Asia. The key turning point into determine China as being a priority in ASEAN neighbor diplomacy, and is considered a key starting point for 31st century maritime Silk Road. Together with ASEAN provide a new platform and opportunity for forging community and share future between China and ASEAN. We want to one Belt, one Road, maritime Silk Road in the near China and connect to ASEAN. The next part, I think the reservation. For the reservation, I would like to know why the rise of China as a superpower geopolitics. Geo-Economics that affect the region, and as well as the international community should define a common position or politics to the right of China as a great power in Southeast Asia. Next, the topic, Geo-Politics. Geo-Politics concept. This is an area where military force have expanded the role and influence China in the area of visitor to the region, ASEAN. This is the concept of strategic politics. And concept, Geo-Economic. Geo-Economic is the concept relation and economic cooperation, trade, investment, and service mixed to tourism. China want go to ASEAN, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam. The concept of ASEAN, example of ASEAN. The concept of ASEAN community was three pillars: the APSC, ASCC. APSC, the mean of ASEAN Political Security Committee, ASEAN Economic Committee, and ASPC, ASEAN Socio-Cultural Committee, is the main China want to use in ASEAN single market and production base. He want to trade and investment in ASEAN. He use benefit in the ASEAN, ASEAN Economic Community. The right of ASEAN, the right of China in the region when the open policy in Deng Xiaoping era economic reform and go out policy in Hu Jintao and Xi Jinping era. Go out policy make China success development country that as a poor become the nation well. Choose to focus on ASEAN and China become that country is a geographical proximity, social and cultural similarity. ASEAN has a lot of resources and is able to contribute the production base to invest for trade, for investment and market distribution. China want to sell food in the ASEAN. Next, the cooperation between the ASEAN-China political, economic, social, and cultural. In terms of, in my, that ASEAN has been trying to build relationship positive of China. ASEAN use economic community for make China-ASEAN FTA, China-ASEAN FTA for benefit ASEAN and China. And next, you want to see the cooperation between China and ASEAN and Thailand. My in Thailand context of the ASEAN community, which consists of three pillars: APSC, AEC, ASCC, the impact on Thailand to be abundant competitive is because Thailand has several limitations must be developed, include infrastructure development, the road from Kunming in Laos, in Thailand to Malaysia and Singapore. China use the road for send to cruise distribution in the Greater Mekong sub-region and ASEAN. And next, the importance of ASEAN. China wants to go to ASEAN. The step in 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization in order to facilitate international trade, and China to mix the Greater Mekong sub-region, Yunnan and Guangxi province, make the Greater Mekong sub-region China-ASEAN Free Trade Area. Thailand was the first ASEAN benefit under area with program in 2003 between China and ASEAN. And in conclusion, the changing relation between ASEAN and China among the change that occurs from the entire international political, economic, geography, and to conduct political relation to economic cooperation, which has made geo-economic of ASEAN and China to become major economy of Asia. China want to use benefit the international relation economic in the ASEAN. I think in the future, China use high-speed rail diplomacy in Laos, in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suvakunta, and thank you for sticking to time. I think you've touched on quite a bunch of issues that I'd like to come back to in a bit. But before we get to the questions, let me call the next speaker, Dr. George Cooke, Deputy Director, Bandaranaike Center for International Studies, Sri Lanka, who will be talking about China-Sri Lanka relations. Thank you, Dr. Cooke.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jacob, for moderating. Thank you very much to Pramod for inviting me to be a part of this particular discussion, this particular session. I'm going to be looking at relations between Sri Lanka and China. And in doing so, it is very, very significant for us to focus on, to try to understand what is happening in the relationship, what has happened thus far, where are we going right now, how are relations developing, and what future prospects lie ahead in this relationship between our two countries. When we look at a historical perspective of understanding the relationship, we go back to 1950, when Sri Lanka first recognized the People's Republic of China. But it was not until 1957 when diplomatic ties were established between the two countries. But of course, there was something very significant that happened in between those two dates, and that was 1952, where necessity-based decisions led to the usage of trade, economics. And this is where what happened in 1952 resonates what is happening right now in the 21st century. Trade, economics is bringing countries together. This is what is bringing countries like Sri Lanka and China together. This is having a huge impact in terms of support that countries are giving each other. When you look at a country like Sri Lanka, we are very mindful of the fact that as a small country, Sri Lanka has to contend with, has to bear, has to deal with various scenarios, and depends very heavily on the whole concept of diplomacy. Diplomacy in terms of global engagement, given the fact that the country has played a significant role on the international stage and is ever present within the South Asian context, but also beyond that, and is looking for engagement beyond that. Large countries like China, very interestingly, a scholar, Martin Yarks, described China not just as a nation state, but as a civilization state, looking at the size of the country, looking at the context in which we are trying to deal with this particular country. But what happened with regard to connectivity back in the 1950s, which also resonated in 1957 when on the 4th of February, you had Chow Enlai being invited to be a special guest at the Independence Day celebrations in Ceylon at the time. I just want to quote two particular remarks that were made, one by Chow Enlai and one by the Prime Minister of the time, SWRB Bandaranaike. Premier Chow says, he looks at the concept of the relationship and he says, the Chinese and Ceylonese people have more or less the same destiny. And that was quite an interesting observation to be made at that particular time, given the relative distance between the two countries, the fact that we had just engaged upon diplomatic connectivity. But something that Prime Minister Bandaranaike observed on that occasion was where he said, we in Ceylon and the countries of Asia look upon the contribution which the People's Republic of China is making in shaping the new world as perhaps the greatest contribution any country has made. This is 1957. China of 1957 and China of 2020 are two very different Chinas in regard to development, in terms of progress, in terms of levels of prosperity, economic progression. But it was very, very significant to understand that even back then, there was something very, very momentous that was taking place between the two countries. And this has got to be understood in the context of that particular relationship. Sri Lanka works very much with countries in the South Asian region, but also looks at key allies outside. This has been something that has taken place on numerous occasions from independence onwards. Why is Sri Lanka doing this? The country sometimes might be referred to as an island, but it is not an island in that sense of the word. It is not isolated, marooned, cut off from the rest of the global community, but has been playing a very critical role on the world stage. Now, how is that further augmented in terms of the relationship that Sri Lanka has sealed with a country like China? Whether it has been governments of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and throughout up to date, there has been a very strong linkage, bond that has taken place between these two countries. Very different in terms of size, very different in terms of potential, very different in terms of markets, output, levels of prosperity. But yet, that is where the uniqueness of the relationship comes into bearing. And that is where we've got to understand, when you understand China, when you're trying to understand what this country has achieved, where this country is going, what this country is trying to do, that is what is one of the most critical factors. Very often, we tend to look at another country or try to understand ramifications within that country from the perception of our own country. Sometimes we don't look at it from another person's shoes. How does China look upon it? What exactly would be going on within their decision-making framework? That is something that needs to be emphasized and focused on. And that is where, if you want to look at a mutually beneficial relationship developing, it is very important. It's a very critical factor to comprehend China from a Chinese perspective and wonder why that country is engaging that much more with the world at large. You've probably heard of China's 2 centenary goals. To the 5-pronged approach of building socialism with Chinese characteristics, the whole process of building up a socialist economy, a socialist democracy, a socialist advanced culture, as well as a socialist harmonious society, and a socialist ecological civilization. This is where the Chinese leadership has sought to strategize foreign policy extremely effectively and efficiently by basing it on domestic demand and policy. This is where even a country like Sri Lanka, we've come several years after the end of the conflict within the island. Sri Lanka was set back by several decades owing to the conflict that occurred over here. Development did take place. It wasn't at a complete standstill. We did have development taking place throughout the conflict, but yet it needs to be borne in mind that the country was well ahead of several countries in Southeast Asia, even well ahead of countries like China at its very initial stages. What happened? This is where you had the intervention of the conflict. This is where things went wrong to a large degree. How is Sri Lanka going to make up for lost time? What are we going to do? When we talk about development, when we talk about progress, we need to ask ourselves the question, do we want the development or not? And undoubtedly, this is something that we do want. This is something that we are trying to encapsulate in the entire governance of this island. But then are we willing also to remain the way we are, or do we want to do it on a much faster pace? Who is going to assist? What countries are going to step forward in that assistance process? What countries are going to be strategically aligned to Sri Lanka in supporting the country's development drive or its desire for greater advancement, greater progression, greater prosperity? The development context, when we talk about it, we sometimes refer to various possibilities, various means. We look at infrastructure development as being one of the most crucial, one of the most critical factors in the development of a society, in the development of a country and its economy. This is where Sri Lanka is very, very keen, pursuing extremely prudent policies in terms of enhancing policies from a national interest perspective, which is something that every country is doing on the world stage. Every country is looking at an issue from a national interest perspective. It is something very, very essential. It is entrenched in policy formulation and implementation. From that perspective, when the country reaches out, when the country is looking to the international community for support, for assistance, for investment, which countries are willing to come forward? Many have come forward, but one country that stands out, no doubt, is China, given the significant role this country has been able to play, not only as a country that is rising, but as a country that is helping whilst rising. This is something very unique. And this is something that needs to be reflected upon and understood. China does not identify as a developed country. And that itself talks about the goal, the prosperity of where the country wants to be in terms of being identified as a developed country. But as a developing country, this country is also reaching out to others in that process of support that is being given, especially through financial institutions like the AIIB or through the latest initiative of the BRI. Now, when you see that happening, when countries like Sri Lanka are exposed to such development programs in the world, it is natural for countries to want to be aligned with such programs, with such policies, with such initiatives. We're not going to shun them. We're not going to turn away from them. The country wants to progress. The country wants to see some degree of prosperity. How does the country go about achieving that? You've got to make key friends, key allies out there in the international community, be it in South Asia, be it beyond the South Asian region. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about this particular century. This is the Asian century. We've got to make sure that this region clinches this century. If not, it is going to pass. It is going to become mere rhetoric, just terminology that is being used and wasted. In that pursuit of understanding the Asian century, certainly countries like China are playing a very, very critical role, but there are other key stakeholders. This is where countries like Sri Lanka, other countries in ASEAN, elsewhere in South Asia, also in the Far East, need to understand the whole concept of how Asian economies have to get together. Trade does that. Trade binds us. Trade brings us together. Economics does that. This is where we have seen massive progress taking place in regions outside of Asia, where they based it upon the whole necessity of looking at it from an economics point of view. And we've seen massive progress. Take the European Union, for example. Look at the degree of progress that region has made from the Second World War to date. How much more our region, Asia as a whole, not just the sub-region of South Asia, but Asia as a whole, how much this region can benefit through the process of further, deeper integration, strengthening of relations. That is something that Sri Lanka is very, very keen to see. President Xi Jinping, and I want to end with this particular point, speaking at a forum a couple of years ago, talked about China as an important member of the Asian and global family. He said China cannot develop itself in isolation from the rest of Asia and the world. On their part, the rest of Asia and the world cannot enjoy prosperity and stability without China. This is where we've got to be aware of the fact that China has accepted its role in the Asian context and very much on the global stage as well. And it is obvious that the sooner we view this country as a friend, as a key partner, as a key strategic ally in the region, we're all, after all, at the end of the day, focus on this from an Asian perspective. How much more we can derive from this equation, how much more we can derive from this understanding. There are issues that may bedevil relations in this region, but these are things that have to be overcome. These are things that have to be focused on from a much larger perspective, looked at from the bigger picture, in terms of understanding what this region stands to gain and what this region would actually lose with further divisions in the whole context of Asia. And that is where, when we talk about focusing on understanding China, whether I'm looking at it from a Sri Lankan perspective, whether I'm looking at it from a South Asian perspective, or whether we look at it from a greater Asian perspective. Something that we've got to be very, very mindful of is the fact that China is an extremely powerful country within the region, a country that is willing to work with other countries, willing to engage, willing to invest. Of course, there's something for China to gain in the process. That's natural. Everyone's looking for something that is mutually beneficial. But this is where countries have got to strategize foreign policy in such a way as to ensure that irrespective of the policy, irrespective of the program, irrespective of the process involved, it is very, very essential for us to focus on the bigger picture. What is this bigger picture? Looking at the Asian century, looking at what all our countries are going to collectively achieve as one particular unit. We're a long way from identifying as a larger Asian community, but it's high time we started taking steps towards that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cooke. We have our next speaker, Professor Shin Kawashima from Japan. Professor Shin is a well-known scholar of China from Japan, and today he will be speaking to us about China-Japan relations in the wake of COVID-19. Professor Kawashima,
yes,
over to you.
Yeah, good evening. This is Kawashima speaking. I have shared my PPT, okay?
Yeah, please.
Yes, I said my presentation is 8:11 in Japan time. Yeah. Today I talk about the Japan's diplomatic policy for China under the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, as you know, Sino-Japanese relations was a little bit sensitive in 2008 to 2012 because of the Senkaku TIIE problem. And the Abe administration started in 2012, and he started improving the relationship with China in 2014. And in that year, in 2014, Sino-Japanese diplomatic service got some consensus, 4 points on the Senkaku TIIE Islands, the territorial issues. And also Abe and Xi Jinping got chance to meet at the Southeast Asia at the time. Yeah. And Abe got advanced improvement after 1914. And on May 2017, Mr. Nikai, the Secretary General of LDP is the ruling party in Japan, joined the BRI forum. Yes, he was welcomed by China so much. And his Nikai is a very, very famous person. He was pointed out the pro-China person by the CSIS in Washington, D.C. last month. On June, PM Abe, June in 2017, Abe mentioned BRI so positively. Actually, before the 2017, Abe criticized the OBOR because of the 4 points, some economic problem and some debt trap and so on. But Abe changed his discourse. He said that if China solve the 4 points, the problems of 4 points, Japan could support or Japan could join the PLI. So he changed the discourse at the time. But Abe's statement was also welcomed by China so much at the time. And on October 2018, Abe visits China. On the same month, as you know, on the October in 2018, Abe visited China. There is some good point for Abe because he want advance the improvement of China. However, on that month, as you know, Vice President Pence made a speech at Hudson Institute on the same month. So it is some problem for Japan between USA and China. On 2018, China, USA started actually the Sino-US spirit started in 2015 or 16, but Trump administration is advanced such a confrontation with China. So Vice President made such a aggressive speech. So Abe's visit changed to be some sensitive visit at the time. So Abe paid attention to both China and the USA at the time. Such a sensitive standpoint of Japan, the typical case between US and Japan, US and China. On May 2019, President Xi did the telephone meeting with PM Abe. This is the epoch-making of change of Chinese attitude toward Japan. Before that point, Japanese Prime Minister have never done the telephone meeting with the Xi Jinping or Hu Jintao. Japanese Prime Minister have only done the telephone meeting with Prime Ministers in China, okay, Wen Jiabao or others, Zhu Rongji and others. But it's a strong message. Xi Jinping also agreed on improvement with Japan. So after the point, Chinese scholars and officials and some economic society advanced in terms of improvement policy toward Japan so strongly. So the tourists, so many Chinese tourists came to Japan to buy so many goods. Okay, so it's big change. And then you can understand that the US has pressure toward China changes towards Japan. Okay, and President Xi plans to visit Japan on April 2020, but this visit is extended by the pandemic of COVID-19 now. Yes. As you know, under the COVID-19, Chinese mask diplomacy is so famous. However, yes, before the Chinese mask diplomacy, there is another story. Japan provides masks and medical support to China before the start of pandemic in Japan. So on January and February, at the time, the pandemic in Japan has not started. So at the time, Japanese people and the Japanese friendship cities with China sent so many masks and medical support to China. Okay, but on the March and the April, the pandemic was started in Japan. Okay, and after also the March and April, the Chinese situation was getting better. So China started support Japan. However, Japan has already sent masks to China, and also so many Chinese Japan, they buy a boat app, the masks and others. So this mask diplomacy of China toward Japan is not so successful, I think. Yes, so this economy and anti-China sentiment is the key concept between the relationship between Japan and China. And also this situation can share the other countries like South Korea and Taiwan and others. As you know, in Japan, almost 80 or 20% Japanese, okay, answer unfavorable in China. Please see this chart. This chart is Japanese favorite and unfavoriteness on China from 1978 to at the present. So the red line is unfavorite, yellow line is a favorite. So almost 90% Japanese do not like China. It is so clear. Turning point of Tiananmen instance square, Tiananmen Square incident, and also the maybe about the 2008 and 2005. Okay. However, more than 70% Japanese answer and recognize Sino-Japanese relations is important, and the reason is economy. So most of Japanese do not like China. However, Sino-Japanese relation is important for Japan. Reason is the economy. Okay. Why doesn't the Japanese like China? Maybe main reason is territorial issues and historical issues and so on. So please see this chart. Okay, this is the trade situation between Japan and China, Japan and USA. Blue line is USA, red is China. So in almost 2004 and 2005, the red line okay, was over the blue. So at the time, China changed to be the largest trade partner of Japan. Okay, and after that, China is the largest partner of Japan. And this is the FDI from Japan to China. Yes, yes, decreasing. However, basically China is one of the most important target of the Japanese FDI. So China is the largest trade partner of Japan after 2004. Okay, and recently many Japanese companies push advance the R&D, research and development cooperation. Okay. And also 5G and other high-tech cooperation is also advanced, and most of Japanese companies, cooperate with China. However, most Japanese economic study companies are facing with so-called decoupling problem between US and China. Actually, Huawei Japan is so active in Tokyo. So and also Japan has so strong supply chains with China, and the Chinese market is so attractive. However, recently the U.S. pressure toward Abe administration, U.S. pressure to the Japanese economic study are getting larger and larger now. Okay. So the point is, so in the so-called public opinion is not so good for China. However, most of the Japanese recognize the China-Japanese relations is important because of the economy. So they touch territorial issues and economy. There is some contradict point in Japan. So if China stimulates the territorial issues, okay, Japanese conservative power made pressure to Abe administration to be against China. However, basically, economic study supports China. So such a divide is so interesting. And also, US pressure is a second factor. Yes, these are the territorial issues. Okay, please check the chart. This chart is the number of the Chinese public vessels of hygiene, Chinese Coast Guard, to enter the territorial water or the connecting water of Senkaku TIIE Islands. This chart is made by the Japanese Coast Guard. Please check this part. Okay, the COVID-19 started in December of 2019 or the January 2020, yes. But please check here. The period of COVID-19, pandemic of COVID-19, Chinese public vessels activity was getting more active. Okay, when China pandemic was advanced, Chinese activities of Chinese public vessels was active, and after that, in Japan, the pandemic was happened. Yes, Chinese the activities of Chinese public vessels was getting more active. Navy also, Chinese Navy also, and in Taiwan, the Chinese Air Force planes are so active. It's needless to say about the South China Sea. Okay, and China-US confrontation and Japan. How does Japan keep economic ties under the confrontation between US and China? There's a big problem for Japan now. US Japan are lying in the base of Japan's security, and Japan supports free and open the trade order, and China is the largest trade partner. Yes, this is our principle. However, technological problem covers both security and economy. 5G is covering both. So Pentagon in Washington, D.C. made pressure to Japanese government. Japanese government accepted. Japan, yes, persuade the Japanese Economic Society not to use 5G or others. We are now facing with this problem. US urges Japan to join Five Eyes group to adopt a strict policy toward China. Another big problem. However, Japanese Economic Society has strong ties with China, so how do we adopt a cope with such a US pressure? Decoupling? How does Japan and other regional powers, middle powers, hold relatively independent stance over the confrontation against China? Under the pandemic, COVID-19, US policy is getting more aggressive to China, and Australia and some European countries changed those stance to China, similar to USA. So how do we keep the relatively independent policy such as US decoupling? Is a big problem now. So Japanese government decided not to use Huawei in the sensitive zone, in the security and diplomacy and others. However, in the old society or economic society, Huawei is expected to be one of the options now, with Japan separates the sensitive part and others. However, I don't know. Mr. Trump will yes. Okay, I stop.
No, right.
Taiwan issue is so sensitive. The Taiwan in Taiwan, the security problem, the TSMC technological issues are yes in the island. Okay, and the BLI and FOIP is also a big problem. But I don't know. US and Japan recently do not propose any new concept, especially on the economy. RCEP, Japan agreed on completing the negotiation in this year. Yes, Japan really expected India's joining. However, yes, it's okay. So Japan decided to complete the negotiation in this year. Thank you so much. I introduced the Sino-Japan relations at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Kawashima, and I'm sorry to hurry you up, but we are, I think, already running over time, and we have two more speakers, Jayshree Borah and Chang De-chun, both of them PhD candidates. So first, I'll ask Ms. Borah to start. She's from the Shanghai International Studies University in China, and she's going to be speaking to us on the role of capacity building in Chinese foreign policy in the case of South Asia. Jayshree, over to you. 10 minutes, please.
First of all, good evening, everyone, and good afternoon, actually. And I'm really grateful to NICE Nepal and Dr. Pramod Jaiswal for giving me this opportunity to speak in this forum. So my topic today is actually, it stems out from a larger project, which is also my PhD project. It's about China's peace building approach in conflict-ridden countries. So in my PhD project, I mostly look at North Africa and Middle Eastern countries. But for this presentation, I would be, even though I say like South Asia, but I would be actually, I have looked at two countries, Myanmar and Nepal, for this presentation. So China's approach to peace building has many nuances and that have not been analyzed in one platform, especially how multidimensional Chinese foreign policies could be towards the conflicted states. From engaging in defense diplomacy to military training and efforts to mediate conflict, holding security forums, all could be seen as small pieces of the larger part of Chinese foreign policy or diplomacy towards countries with interstate conflict. Well, there are scholars like Gill and Rayleigh and Jacobson and Knox. They have said that while Chinese Communist Party retains the ultimate power, but China's foreign policy formation and implementation involve not only government agencies, but also a wide range of other actors, including businesses across a range of sectors, then academic institutions, various civil society actors, many of which also house quasi-governmental officials. So when I talk about capacity building programs, these are also part of a larger foreign policy goals of Chinese government. So these capacity building programs are also part of the key principles of Chinese foreign policy. So some, for example, peripheral diplomacy, Chuopian, which in Chinese is like Chuopian Waiqiao, which started in 90s, but with the Xi Jinping, this territorial diplomacy is in the forefront of Chinese foreign policy. So in Chinese, it's called Mu Lin, An Lin, Fu Lin, which means like be friendly, make them feel secure, and help make them rich. I think our colleague for today from Sri Lanka, he actually have mentioned that how, like the countries are actually happy about how China is helping them making rich. So we'll come back to that later, but the second part is like these programs are also part of the China's narrative of the responsible state narrative, which came in 2015, came after 2015 Robert Jülich speech when he asked China to be a responsible power, and this through this program, China could be seen as a contributor to the international public good. Also, these programs could be seen as a part of China's participation in with multilateral institutions, because some of these programs are also also related to helping other countries with United Nations goals like SDGs. Third is also, these are also a part of the going out strategy, which is in Chinese Zhou Tu Tu Chuanlui. And this started in 1997 by Jiang Zemin. Third is Hopin Fachan, peaceful development. And the recent is, of course, the Belt and Road Initiative. While these are important parts of Chinese foreign policy, one aspect, the one aspect which is not touched by scholars a lot, which is also like the recent where like the Chinese foreign policy is giving more importance recently, is the security development nexus, which also brings me back to Mr. George's presentation on Sri Lanka, where he actually has accepted that the development is more important, which is also a part of like the Chinese foreign policy, where in Chinese, before it was like peaceful development, and now they talk about like security development nexus, which or developmental peace. Developmental peace in Chinese is Fajan Hafin, but before it was like Hafin Fajan. So what are these capacity building programs? Actually, capacity building programs could be anything from Confucius Institutes, and there could be like a various means. But for this, for my research, I actually have looked at the state-sponsored training programs, which China state-sponsored training programs through various forums and government-led NGOs like Gongos or Go NGOs. For my previous research, I actually did research on the foreign diplomacy, but my research was mostly based on the Middle East and Africa, and where it's very important like to see that, I mean, during all this, I think I have like argued somewhere else that even during this COVID-19, how China is so focused on its, which I call like a pre-planned diplomacy, which is still ongoing. Well, while the other countries are, mostly focused on their domestic issues, but China is still focused on this small, how to say, small tools of foreign policy goals. Like, so the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum, which happened virtually on July 6th, as well as the extraordinary China-Africa Solidarity Program, which also happened. So through these forums, like the China-Arab Cooperation Forum and then the Forum of China-Africa Cooperation, the idea of the vocational training has started. I think it was back in 2006. This was first of all, it was mainly based on China's African security strategy. This capacity building program started. And then so through these forums, they had the vocational training workshop for not only for like this, what is like interesting for me is these programs are not only for students. These are not like only scholarships provided to students, but also these are like vocational training program for diplomats, and then media specialists, and then like a young people in governments, and then poverty. I mean, there's all sort of programs ranging from agriculture to my concern is where I find it more interesting is the programs for media specialists and diplomats. And these are, initially these are mostly for the African, as I told you, like it was mostly part of the strategy for African security concern. But later, when I started looking at its neighborhood, then I saw that these programs are also present in its neighborhood. Especially for this presentation, I'm going to talk about Myanmar and a little bit of Nepal. Why Myanmar? Because Myanmar also falls under the category of countries that have like internal conflicts going on. So why I think these programs are important for China, because President Li Keqiang, he in his speeches to Myanmar, or while he talks about the peace in Myanmar or the peace in Africa, he keeps mentioning about the training program and capacity building, the importance of, I mean, in his 2017 speech, he has mentioned like 3 times about the training programs. This was for Myanmar. When I looked at Myanmar, so I saw that like it was it was since 2012 they have started, like because of the bad reputation China was getting, the image China was getting from Myanmar because of the Chinese building in the dam for the environmental reasons. So because of that, China has started sending like officials and scholars to investigate how to promote bilateral and non-governmental ties. And this could be like varied from education, healthcare, disaster relief, environment, etc., etc. And then the Chinese embassy they sponsor vocational training courses for local businessmen and also offer Mandarin courses for governmental bureaucrats. And the Yunnan University.
You have just 2 minutes left.
Yunnan University has like trained NLD leaders. So basically, what is more important, I would say that the China NGO Network for International Exchange, which is it's a flagship event of which I found it very interesting, because this China NGO which was formed in 2005, and it has invited the leading leading NGOs from Myanmar and Nepal to the Xi Jinping's 2017 BRI summit. And now also China has this NGO forum like under the Silk Road, and which is through this program, through this China CHINA-ASEAN NGO programs, they are helping Myanmar and Nepal to have these capacity building programs. And what is more interesting was for me is like they also have this like Buddhist association with Myanmar. So it's very interesting that the China's Buddhist Association President Xue Cheng, he actually has asked like Myanmar's monks to make contributions to pushing forward the BRI, and arguing that the cross-border road would be an important channel for the spread of Buddhism. And when coming to Nepal, I would just give a brief example of Nepal, because even during this COVID pandemic going on, they actually had in June, they had this virtual training program for NCP through CP, Chinese Communist Party, which is also, I think like these are the capacity building programs I'm talking about here. So so it has raised a lot of criticism in Nepal, and this is like a second training program for NCP. The first held in 2019 September before Xi Jinping's visit. But then even though it has a lot of criticism in Nepal, but also there are the Nepal's Prime Minister actually, he said that we kind of like this. China has its own Chinese communism, which China's characteristic. So probably Nepal should develop its own characteristic, like communism with Nepal's characteristic or something like that. So which is why this training.
We gotta wind up.
So, okay, so so please let me talk about my conclusion, why I think it's important. Because these programs help China to build its own diplomatic narrative as a partner of the global South, and then it helps maintain bilateral relations, that it portrays China as a responsible power. It also gives China the leverage to being politically closer to these countries, and then these are also activities that fits nicely with China's diplomatic interest in developing countries. And the third is like these programs help China build narrative of which I have to say, like, I'm not sure like it's good or bad, but this does help these countries to keep put together in one box, which is like a anti-West, anti-West box. So, so I think the importance of this grassroots level initiative at Chinese foreign policy is it's very important for us to look at. Thank you so much for your presence, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Jayshree. So, you know, we have actually one more, or actually two more speakers, including Ms. Zhang. There's also Mr. Ararat Kostanian from Armenia. So, without further ado, Ms. Zhang Telchun, who is a PhD candidate at the Leiden University, Netherlands, and is going to be talking to us about China's cyber nationalism. Over to you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Zhang. Sorry, my mistake.
No, no problem. Should we start?
Yes, please. Please start.
Yeah. This is Jayshree Borah. I'm currently a PhD candidate of the Leiden University. I'm going to talk about the digital nationalism of China. Right at the moment, the digital media is playing an increasingly important role in Chinese politics, but also the nationalism. Many scholars have already observed that the rise of the cyber nationalism in China. So I'm going to introduce two cases of my previous study to introduce the digital nationalism in China and the role of the Chinese government. The first case is the Mo incident in Chinese search engines. I compared two Chinese-born search engines and Google Hong Kong to compare their ranking, content references, and their encyclopedia servers to see the role of the government. In terms of the finding, I found that the Chinese search engine actually like to list their own servers at the very top of the ranking and like to list their own servers. But also Chinese, so they have sort of own content bears, but also Chinese foreign search engines also have sort of country-oriented bears, which means that Chinese search engine there's no foreign links on the Chinese search engines. Chinese search engines only single out the domestic Chinese resource, especially the sources from the Communist Party of China. If you compare it with their encyclopedia service, you can find that Chinese-born encyclopedia service, they not only share the high similarities, but also roughly share the same structure, references, and the point of view. However, if you compare to the Wikipedia, they have different structures, references, and the point of view. For instance, Wikipedia lists 78 references from 25 countries and regions. However, for instance, Baidu Baike only have 17 references, but all of them references are from China. So and also in terms of structure, Wikipedia not only to draw the post size of the issues, but also to draw the background and the impact of these issues. However, Chinese-born search engines only to introduce the post size of the issues, which link to how the Western country afraid of China to be stronger. So based on the result, we can find that actually right at the moment search engines also still have the internet filter, indeed, and which means that it's constructed since of the search engines bears that we can see the different references from the different search engines and construct a biased social reality. So overall, in terms of the Chinese internet, digital media are ready to facilitate a media logic that's approving of the Chinese government, which is a traditional mass media logic. Although Chinese propaganda is altered to the two-tiered system which featured of centralizing and decentralizing. In terms of the centralizing feature, which means that Chinese government still using sort of mass media and education to spread the things of nationalism, but also Chinese government is trying to cooperate with the internet companies to delegate the internet company to help them to filter the knowledge and to construct the sense of the better society, better social reality. So Chinese search engines and their allied services are still designed to facilitate and maintain the Chinese government's point of view under a Chinese political and social background. And the Chinese government adjusts the Chinese search engines according to its own interest and ensure the nationalism is incorporated into the digital nationalism. So it's the first case I'm going only briefly introduce. The second case is the national identity on the Weibo. during the 17th National Day of China. This study mostly introduced to see how the various interested party to express the nationalism and what's the tactics of the various interested party to utilize. In terms of the funding, this study found that in terms of the expression of the nationalist discourse, it was high in charge of the national sentiment, which means they are proud of China, their love of China, but also high in charge of the national identity, that to be proud of China and unites all the Chinese identity, including in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and overseas China. Also, in terms of the expression of the nationalist discourse, they also high in charge with the collective destiny, which means that the netizens or the various interest party to show their strong willing to build a stronger China, to wish China to have a bright future. Lastly, the study found that actually the internet user also to show their grateful and thanks to the party CCP and also the President Xi Jinping. In terms of the tactic they use, they not only to tax on the Weibo, Shin on Weibo, but also to use the symbolic picture to share their emotion and sentiment, like the flags and hearts, to amplify the emotion and content of the post. Also, they also use sort of the selfie strategy I coined, which means that when the internet users to join the activity or to see a propaganda movie regarding the National Day, they will take a selfie picture and share on the internet to express their sentiment and to encourage other internet users to join their activity or to share the sentiments together as well. And the second tactics what they utilize, which is to organize the online activities, which means that, for instance, the People's Daily, they post a post that to encourage the internet user to repost their post in order to celebrate Chinese birthday, to gain maybe a free gift or other issues. But also, fourthly, in terms of tactics, what they use, they also imply the pronoun of us and our to describe being a Chinese, and frame China as their mother to express their sentiment. And lastly, they highlight the most of the tactic what they use, which is highlighted the Chinese humiliating history, like how China to be transferred from a poor country to a powerful actor in the world politics. So based on this case, we can find that Chinese digital nationalism has been long understood as a top-down propaganda model, but right moment is a sign of being a grassroots movement. That the government not only to control the propaganda model, however, internet users are voluntarily or to be influenced to spread a sense of nationalism right at the moment. So digital Chinese nationalism turns to highlights the developments of the China and the improvement of the people's welfare, and highlights Chinese transformation from being a pro country to a powerful country in the world, which using the national flag as a symbol to expand the sentiment. And the netizens' expression of a collective destiny and the gratitude towards CCP, we can say that it's deeply influenced by the top-down propaganda model, which is a patriotic education and the media exposure. So we can argue that although it is so a sense of the grassroots movement, actually this sort of grassroots movement actually is influenced by the top-down propaganda model. Lastly, social media offer a virtual space right at the moment for a public to interact, which leads to a reinforced feeling of belonging, solidarity, and bonding. Hence, the social media offer a space to disseminate and interact with shared symbol that offer the space and the vehicle to create and express of collective national identity and a sense of nationalism. So based those two cases, we can conclude that digital media offer a virtual space to reinforce a sense of nationalism and a national identity. So digital media right moment is playing a quite important role to interact with the users' slogan and the national symbols. And the active online nationalism discourse reflects the idea of the state-led nationalism, which promoted by traditional media campaigns and the patriotic education. However, social media to some extent viewed as a lever in the Chinese media environment, but also follow the media logic which dominates by the Chinese government. And also Chinese nationalism is created and mobilized through the interplay between the politics and technology, which result in the national expression being incorporated into the social media. And also we can argue that actually nationalism is rooted in its humiliating history, no matter in the case of the Mohenjo incident or even the celebrated Chinese birthday. For instance, in terms of the Mohenjo incident, most of the content, if you search on the search engines, you can find it. They highlight, especially the CCP content, they highlight how America and Canada or Western countries are afraid of China to be stronger. In terms of celebrating, even the celebrating Chinese birthday, it's a happy issue, right? They highlight how China, from a poor country to a powerful country, how they win the games with the American. So it's deeply rooted in the humiliating history, especially since these and the CCP's glorious achievements and the policies are required teaching materials in the CCP's patriotic educational syllabus and the exposure by the media. So overall, we can say that Chinese government still aim to inject the nationalism and its interest via digital media, which is accomplished through interplay between the internet and the politics. And the Chinese media, to some extent, follow the Chinese government media logic to spread the government interest. And that's all. I want to save some time. Yeah.
Thank you, Chang To-chun, and I think that was a fascinating presentation. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. But before we get to the Q&A, over to Ararat Kostanian, Junior Fellow, Institute of Oriental Studies, National Academy of Science of Armenia. And he is going to be talking about the new strategy. BRI is a new strategy for establishing civilizational and harmonious world community. Over to you.
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Ararat, please. I can hear you.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the invitation. I chose to talk about this civilizational topic because mostly I've realized that when we talk about One Belt, One Road initiative, and I have been twice invited to international conference in Beijing. And mostly I realized in China and globally also when dealing with BRI, mostly they talk about economic issues such as trade, infrastructure, IT, modern military, and etc. But unfortunately, the civilizational and people-to-people relation is most of the times it comes during the conferences at the last session, or even it's not mentioned at all. But when we read Xi Jinping's books on governance of China, one of the points of the Chinese dream is to have in China advanced cultural atmosphere, and in globally in even in IR relations, they all the time emphasize with countries or regions such as Arabic countries, for example, or with Armenia, as we are also in the big Middle East area. These two big civilizational countries must bring forward what they have through centuries, interactions and their customs, because you know, for example, in China and in Arabic customs, families, friends, and rituals, marriages, and etc. These ceremonies, they have great value, and it's always have been a great value in dealing with in society and in dealing with other societies. So I believe that in terms of expanding or developing our relations with China, we have to consider this issue, and we have to bring forward the seriousness of this issue of bringing harmonious world, not only through economic or benefits in trade, because many times you cannot only be based on trade, because what China provides is good quality goods with with less, let's say, price than what European or American products give you. But at the same time, first, before doing that business, before engaging, you have to, I think, we have to, in general, we have to know the ethics of how dealing with Chinese, because if you learn the history of China, you can see that Confucianism, when they mention about Confucianism now, it is not just mentioning about his name or feeling the nostalgia, you know. It is very clear when dealing with Chinese, even at a business meeting, they pay very serious, how to say, attention about the ethics of what presents you bring, what presents they give you, how you start, how you sit at a table with them, how you talk with them, all this in details. They read the person in front of them, and many times we don't consider this, and the vice versa. When they come to, let's say, when they come to Armenia or Arabic countries, sometimes happened even that they were very sad because the food was not as expected, as good. You know, this is a small things that in West, they don't mention it. I mean, in the West, they can have like, after the conference or during the conference, like coffee session or one burger from McDonald's and it's done. But Chinese are very different, and really they get pissed off when you give them such fast food or etc. This is just one example what I have mentioned. In dealing with Chinese, if we want to expand our relations and get more benefits from One Belt, One Road initiative. Another issue also in China, the society has transformed, and they started to realize the sense of this civilization they had, the importance of the kingdoms they have, the importance of the rituals they have. Because first time when I've been in China, it was in 2006. And last time it was on 2018. And every time I've been there, I started to see there are great transformational social changes that they're not talking about, and we are not searching for those changes. I mean, China's society, what we know from the mainstream media, that is monolithic, socialist, authoritarian. That is actually not true. And I realized those years in the beginning, there was the fashion of Americanization, you know, this all Starbucks and the caps with written on it, New York, blah, blah, etc. I realized that they had the sense to start that modernization, Americanization process in their society. But what I realized the last few years, that the majority of the Chinese society, they're not feeling that they have to become Americanized in order to be modern. And, you know, that is really interesting that they started to get stuck on their kingdom's ritual, on their history, on Confucianism more, on family level. For example, the father is the ruler of the family, the elder brother must take care of the younger brother, and etc. This, when you talk to Westerners, or when you when I describe these things in Armenia, most of the time people think that I'm talking a fairy tale, you know, because after I understand in a sense, because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the American hegemony created a system that only people care about economy, only people care about how to make profit, how to make money. And these civilizational ritual things started to be not so important for people. But I think amid this coronavirus issue, some people, you know, started to say that, okay, humanity exists, you know, and in these terms, and started people to call each other. I take it from my experience again. Some friends calling me from school, I haven't called them for 15 years. One is in US, one is in England, one is in another place. But people started to be curious about each other, to be curious about what's this guy is doing. Is his health is okay? Maybe they read the news that coronavirus is expanding, for example, now in Syria, and people are starting to call each other, ask each other, you know. And in this case, China has to do a big thing because they have this civilizational heritage. They have to start to talk to the people, and at the same time to teach people and expect the same from other old civilization, to bring about their history, about their experience, about their people-to-people relation. And the last thing I want to talk about, that this civilizational issue they brought also in their diplomacy and foreign policy. When they talk about Confucianism, that is not only in their inner, in their inner society advancement and modernization process. They really believe in that China is willing to make the BRI project peaceful for the world, and at the same time win-win solution is possible, because whatever we saw in Western realism, IR, international relation, and in world policy, wherever Americans entered to modernize the region, that region started either to be in civil war, or at the end, American troops entered there. For example, Iraq, Afghanistan, now Syria. I'm not talking against American policy or etc. But I want to say that it's a fact. Wherever Americans entered, that place either started to be in civil war, or American troops started to reveal in that region. So what is now another global power, which is China, what they are telling to the world: if you want to cooperate, grow, and make us grow peacefully, then you join the BRI. That is very simple. Sometimes people make a lot of...
you've got 1 minute left, please.
Yes. Sometimes people start to make theories, and you know, they want to... We academicians, we like to make things sophisticated, but it is very easy point. For example, now China is talking with Arab world, especially with Saudi Arabia and with Iran. They are working very actively with both sides. For example, I believe that it will be very peaceful outcome if Chinese can bring Iranians and Saudi Arabians in one table, and if they can show them a peace deal, you know, that whole region will be in peace. Syria, Palestine, the conflict with Israel, etc., etc. But at the same time, I would like to mention about the setbacks that China is not doing so. China is willing to do what I have talked about, but as I have mentioned, they are putting the stress on economic issues and trade. But they should know, and we should know also, that in our current life, you have to get into people's minds and into people's hearts, not only into people's pockets. Because I'll give you an example. They have created Huawei phones, which has much better camera, which has much better function than iPhone. But still Ren Zhangfei is not Steve Jobs. You know what I mean? This is one example that they have to know how to deal with other people using their civilizational heritage and understanding the other civilizations as well, not just showing their civilization, because there are other old civilizations in the world as well. They are not only one civilization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ararat. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you watching, we've had 7 speakers, and it's really gone over time. But I think we have had a very interesting range of issues covered. And before we start the Q&A, let me quickly acknowledge 2 people. Mr. Tahir Bhatt, from a PhD scholar at the University of Kashmir, and Mr. Waqas Shah from the University of Peshawar, Department of International Relations. They have the most number of questions. Now, we do not have time to take every single question, but I'll try and get through the questions as quickly as possible. Now, I'd like to go start in the order, but Mr. Cooke has just informed me that he has to get to another meeting. So let me ask the first question to Dr. George Cooke, which is also one of the questions that I think Mr. Walker Shah has asked. I think in your presentation, what I would really have liked is a little more detail. Is one of the questions that has been raised is that, South Asia is one of the most poorly integrated regions. And therefore, what exactly is the impact, or how exactly is China going to fit into this region without disruption? And when I say disruption, I mean disruption in a bad way. In your presentation, you did not mention the problems that Sri Lanka has faced in terms of its association with China. The Hambantota issue, for example, the protests around the leasing of Hambantota and 10,000 acres around 15,000 acres of agricultural land around the port. I mean, your points are well taken that Sri Lanka needs to engage, but as you said, it has to be mutually beneficial, and the record currently doesn't seem to support that argument. So how would you answer that? Over to you, Dr. Cooke.
Thank you very much. I'll respond to them in two particular points. One talking about Sri Lanka and China, what you just raised, and also secondly, I will look at it from a South Asian perspective and China's involvement in South Asia. From a Sri Lankan perspective, certainly we've seen investment taking place at a rather large pace, rather aggressive stance within the context of Sri Lanka. But this is a country which came out of conflict in 2009. This is a country that looked to the world, looked to countries in the region, outside the region, to gain more assistance, more support, more infrastructure investment. This is something that Sri Lankans want. Sri Lankans have a highway that runs from the capital to the airport. There was a time where people might have protested against it. But do people not use it today? Do people say that's a Chinese highway, we're not going to use it? Everybody who wants to go to the airport would use the highway. When you look at the port in Hambantota, in terms of its strategy, in terms of its location, in terms of its necessity, we've got to understand the fact that having that particular port over there, which is extremely close to international shipping lines, makes it extremely relevant for Sri Lanka, not only to be having further infrastructure in the country, as we saw with the opening of a second airport in the country. We have also in Hambantota a second international airport. And sometimes the questions were asked, why do we need a second airport? Then something that we saw with COVID was that we needed an alternative space, an alternative location in order to bring down loads of Sri Lankans who were returning to the country. And it was very beneficial to have that second airport because it helped us in terms of the quarantining procedures, in terms of the landing of the planes. It went a long way in supporting what Sri Lanka is doing within the country. We've got to understand this from the context of Sri Lanka being a democracy. There are several views, several viewpoints that are taken on board. This is not a country which has a form of one system of governance or one opinion that is expressed across society, but certainly a country that takes on board a diversity of opinions, a diversity of views. There will be protests, there will be opposition, there will be questions raised. But at the end of the day, who wants the investment? Who wants the development? Who wants the progress? Sri Lankans as a whole are benefiting from that process. We've got to understand from a Sri Lankan perspective how we strategize each and every loan, each and every grant that this country receives. Now that is very much within the remit of Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka has got to realize that when a country, irrespective of what the country may be, it may be China, it may be another country, comes forward, assists the country, it is now the ball is in our court to ensure that we use the entirety of that loan to the best of its usage. And none of it is wasted. And this is where it is so very important, and Sri Lanka is looking at that in the current context of a national plan, where the country wants to go, what we want to achieve, and how our partners across the world are going to help us in the achievement of those particular goals, in the achievement of those prospects. But also looking at it from the perspective of South Asia and China's involvement in South Asia, the first point that you raised, we've got to look at what happened in 2017. India and Pakistan were both included as members, full members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now the SCO is a very, very unique organization which remains very much under the radar. A lot of effort is being made to ensure that it does not become highly controversial or is not discussed too much in international fora. But why should we look at the SCO? What is the significance of the SCO? What is the potential of the SCO? India and Pakistan are both members of the SCO. We're going to see India and Pakistan working together within the context of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You're going to have joint military drills. You're going to have joint exercises. You're going to have collaboration. You're going to have the leaders meeting on the sidelines of the summits. You're going to see progress. Give it 10 years, give it 15 years. We are going to see a difference in the context of South Asia. These two countries are going to work together in the greater picture of the SCO. That is going to have a huge impact on South Asia as a whole. And that is something that is going to move our region forward. That is something that is going to move South Asia and SAARC forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cooke. All right, so we'll start with the rest, continue the rest of the questions. We've got about 25 minutes. To the first speaker, Professor Minhas Khan, the most common question to you has been, why or what explains Pakistan's silence over the Uyghur issue? Pakistan, which is seen as a representative or a leader of the Muslim world, has consciously chosen to remain silent, officially at least, as far as the Uyghur issue is concerned, though I understand that within Pakistan, within religious groups, there is a great deal of dissatisfaction. Over to you, Professor Khan. Yeah, Professor Khan, you have to unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Yes. This silence from the government has been particularly noticeable, but international relations, in international relations, if you see, states have their national interest. Within Uyghur, I would say that terrorist organization, or that has been termed as a terrorist organization by United States and international forums, the East Turkestan Islamic movement. China has been faced with the similar problems that Pakistan is faced with since 9/11. That is extremism, religious extremism and terrorism. Now, seen in that context, Pakistan and China share the similar threats from militant organizations that are targeting the state machinery. It is because of the national interest of both the states to condemn these militant organizations that are supported by other non-state actors. Initially, the ETIM was given funds and financially supported by Al-Qaeda and other terrorist networks. So I believe one of the reasons of remaining silent on the issue is that there certainly are militants in Uyghur that has keeping many states to remain silent. This is why that Pakistan has as such not officially said anything on that.
Khan, if I may, and since we are sort of running out of time, I think the question was also specifically about the fact that up to 1 million Uyghurs are interned. I mean, I can understand there is religious extremism or terrorism, but to take a hammer to the problem in this level by interning entire populations, families, that seems sort of, I mean, that's no way to, I mean, I think it was Ararat Constantinian, sorry, who talked about winning hearts and minds. That doesn't seem to be a feasible approach.
I would say that Uyghurs, or the issue of Uyghurs, has to be condemned not only by Pakistan, but all the Muslim world as well. However, I would also say that because of few or a minority group, the region or the area has become target for the state machinery. And that is why most of the time Pakistan has remained silent on the issue, because of these terrorist organizations or religious extremists who become an identity for the whole region. Since ETIM belonged to that area, 1.5 million Uyghur population is being hosted by that terrorist organization, and they are identified as religious extremists. Because if you see Chinese government statements, and most of the time on social media and different networks, we listen to some Uyghur people who say that there are no state aggression against the common people of the area. So that is one thing that I believe is keeping most of the states not to condemn Chinese policy of aggression or Chinese policy of containing those extremist groups.
Thank you, Professor Minhas Khan. I think Professor Shin, who is also an expert on China, will probably have a different way of looking at this same question. But before I come to Professor Shin Kawashima, let me come to Dr. Suvakunta. Dr. Suvakunta, your presentation was interesting also in that it was a largely positive picture of ASEAN-China relations that came through. But, there wasn't so much of a mention of the South China Sea issue as a problem in ties between ASEAN and China. And how this is going to affect the future course of ASEAN-China relations. So would you have any thoughts on that, please? Over to you. And please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the problem between China and ASEAN, China trade, yes, is conflict. China, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Brunei, and Malaysia. Is ASEAN thing the code of conduct in the in ASEAN meeting ASEAN. China, I heard about the scholar in Vietnam. Scholar in Vietnam is Vietnam and China is a problem. Is politics and economic. Vietnam, China want to cooperate with Vietnam. I think sometimes China foreign aid, trade and investment buy resource from Philippines, from Vietnam go to China, and China help Vietnam infrastructure and invest in Vietnam, Philippines. But I think is but now is South China Sea is problem between and China and ASEAN I think the 10 countries in ASEAN want to join economic with China for trade investment and sometimes tourism from China to tourists in Thailand and Malaysia, Vietnam, very much. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I might, one other question I think I'll invite you to think about is, ASEAN talks about ASEAN centrality.
Yes.
And clearly, no other major power around ASEAN wants ASEAN centrality, except as a way of balancing against each other. So how long do you think ASEAN centrality will last, as opposed to merely ASEAN leadership, given the fact that China is becoming more and more powerful?
ASEAN, I think in the future, ASEAN want to balance of power between China and USA to balance. But ASEAN want to China else influence in ASEAN more is impact to politics and economic in ASEAN. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suvakunta. The next questions to Professor Shin Kawashima. Professor Kawashima, it was a very deep dive into the state of affairs of Japan-China relations that you gave. But my question to you is a little more Japan-focused. You talked about a pro-China faction in the LDP. And what I'd like to know is, actually in both India and China, there has been more constituencies that are suspicious about China than there are pro-China factions or pro-China groups. But could you give us a sense of what the lay of the land is in terms of the different institutions in Japan, the foreign ministry, the self-defense forces? What is the thinking on China in these groups? And the second question is that you mentioned the fact that President Xi Jinping of China was willing to speak to the Prime Minister of Japan, or when usually it was only Prime Minister to Prime Minister conversation before. In India also, our Prime Minister has had these informal summits with President Xi Jinping. So the question is this and despite that, we just had an incident on the boundary a few months ago. Still ongoing. So my question is this about developing closer ties, or is it about internal politics in China, where President Xi is trying to undermine the Chinese premier or trying to centralize power in himself?
Yes, thank you so much. About the first question, yes, actually the LDP has two groups, a conservative group and the pro-China group. A conservative group politicians propose the cancel or Xi's visit. Okay. However, and also some former group of the policies in LDP adopted the proposal. However, Nikkei, pro-China group, yes, cut off the proposal. There's some battles was happening in LDP. So interesting. So, and also the Nikkei, the pro-China group, actually they do not like China. Okay, their background is important. Each politician have background. Okay, supporting group. Nikkei's background is the tourism industry. Nikkei is the president of the some association with tourism and something. So they provide the tourism the organization provides some resources to Nikkei. So Nikkei has to mention China positively. Okay, it is so interesting. Each position has each background. So we have to check such each background. And also the other party, some socialist party, Japanese social democratic party, and each party have friendship relations with China. However, Japanese Communist Party is against China, Chinese Communist Party. It's so complex. Okay, and secondly, about your second question, it's also interesting. On the May 2019, why Xi Jinping suddenly adopts such a policy to make a telephone meeting with Abe? That's so interesting. Actually, the G20 Osaka was held on second week or third week on June or May 2019. So Xi Jinping wanted to get some results of diplomacy. Xi Jinping opened the door, not Li Keqiang opened the door. So Xi Jinping wanted to get some result or success result to open the door to Japan. The decision maker is Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping's expression, I think. First. Secondly, as you know, on 2019, under the pressure of the USA, okay. Actually, generally speaking, US-Japan-China triangle, if USA's attitude toward China is getting more aggressive, China will approach it to Japan. This is one theory. So it's a typical case. USA pressure toward China was getting more aggressive after 2018. China started approaching to Japan. Yeah, so I can explain such a thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kawashima. Over to Ms. Jayshree Borah now. Jayshree, a very interesting presentation, a very deeply conceptual, theoretical approach you have taken to studying China's diplomacy. Now, it is a fact that most countries have trouble squaring China's rhetoric with China's practice. So how would you, as a scholar of Chinese foreign policy, of Chinese diplomacy, help explain to a foreign audience why there exists a gap? Is actually China, like all other countries, saying one thing, and it's not something that is particularly to China. Many countries say one thing, do something else. But is there a method to how China does this? Is the question.
So you are asking like what is the difference between what is they're actually doing in the field, or whether they're just talking all this in paper?
Well, in the field, of course. I mean, in actual. Yeah.
So the question is like between the rhetorical and the practice. So yes, like in paper, like in rhetorically, they keep saying. They keep mentioning a lot about, like before I used to look at the civilizational state speech, like in every speech you will find the civilizational state reference. And then later, because now like specifically I'm looking at this security development nexus approach. So this capacity building has been like one of the if you look at like dominant feature in Chinese foreign policy. First, it was mostly, as I said, it was only in African continent, and actually one scholar like Professor Lina Pendula, she has done a like really good, really awesome study on, and she refers to this as a like knowledge sharing platforms. So for me, I think, I mean, if you just look at the capacity building programs, those are present both in rhetoric and in practice. And these are actually present in, as I mentioned about Myanmar and Nepal, I give few examples, these are actually present. And right now, I think from the Chinese...
Actually, one second, what the case of Nepal isn't capacity building, it's propaganda. You have Xi Jinping being taught. That is, I mean, I don't know if that is capacity building as opposed to propaganda. Yes? I mean, there's a difference, surely.
Well, I mean, you could say it's, but those are also like in the policies as well. It's not only like, but in that sense, then everything would be, you could say everything is a propaganda, right? Like it would not be like only one capacity building is propaganda. If we look at from that point of view, then we could say like, okay, everything is a propaganda, as a part of a propaganda, but also then you have to like, I think then you have to like use both Chinese foreign policy and propaganda as like synonyms.
So
I don't know.
Training of diplomats is one thing,
yes.
Giving them training in the actual nitty-gritty of diplomacy versus, putting forward somebody's political thought or an idea. As I mean, that's
the Nepal case is like it was very interesting because before Nepal, for Africa, and mostly they started with like giving this example of development, like in agriculture, in the field of agriculture or environment. And this is, I think, this ideological connection. It's a very new thing, but I would not say it's a very new thing actually. When you see like a China's relationship with Latin America, then actually they used to talk a lot about ideology, especially with Cuba and Venezuela. They still do when with the COVID-19. When Cuba was one of those countries who like small countries who could combat with the pandemic, then they said, oh, okay, so we also have like the we shared ideology. We are also communist country. They are also communist country. So basically, like all the communist countries in the world it's easier for them to combat the pandemic. So I would say with Latin America as well. I think you already know the CELAC forum diplomacy, and then they have those and with these forums also they have these smaller forums. So which is like I find it like very interesting, and especially now with this NGO Silk Route NGO forum. I mean, I actually didn't have any idea before like 2017, before I started looking at these smaller elements of Chinese foreign policy. I think it hasn't been studied very well as of now. I mean, Lina Benabullah I think she is like one of the few scholars who have studied extensively. The Chinese scholars, by the way, like Chinese scholars, they do talk about these programs, but not as a from an outsider view, but as a platforms where China is giving whatever their knowledge to other countries and helping. And what is interesting for me is that, as I said, the China network of international exchange, these programs are also helping like a livelihood. The Nepal, they have this China social organization, and in 2019 they had this forum where they are from all over the world. They have I mean mainly from developing countries. I'm not sure if India was a participant, but they had NGOs from Cambodia, Myanmar, and then all other countries. And these countries actually, they have these China social organizations, and organizations from these countries, they have these mutual programs for programs where they help to they help these social development goals. They help to fulfill for United Nations. So I would also like to
I think we have to stop it there, because we have two more.
Just one point.
Sure.
So, so this is very interesting, because I think before this sort of like training programs was part of like United Nations, UNDP, all these global organizations, and not like in a bilateral level, and not from a point of view of foreign policy. I think I have to go deep and see if there are other countries who also have this sort of programs. India actually has done it jointly with China for Afghan diplomats. So I'll probably like to have a more discussion later.
Thank you, Jayshree. Over to Chang Tochun. Tochun, very interesting presentation. You talked about cyber nationalism, the different forms it takes. So my question is, you've talked about both top-down nationalism or imposition, as well as grassroots nationalism. And most of it has been talked in terms of in a relationship with the outside world. But the question really is, just because the Chinese are nationalists or cyber warriors, wolf warriors, and so on, does that mean that ordinary Chinese citizens give a free pass to their government when it comes to domestic issues? As in, can somebody be both extremely nationalist and gung-ho abroad, but also extremely critical of his government inside?
Well, thanks for your question. Actually, it is quite a tricky question. That you mean, so your question is whether the overseas Chinese could be pro-China, or whether the domestic Chinese could be critical to China, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, you can look at it that way.
Yeah, this is actually a tricky question. Actually, this is what basically my PhD study doing, because the COVID-19, for instance, if you see the COVID-19 case, you can see that when the Dr. Liwen Liang's issues happens, many internet users actually criticize their government. However, after maybe 1 month, after 1 month, 1.5 months, when the Chinese issues getting better, Chinese netizens, Chinese domestic international internet users actually, they suddenly forget these issues and to be pro of China. And also in terms of the international abroad or overseas Chinese, for instance, like the overseas student like me, when the things happens, they criticize China, like the domestic Chinese as well. They criticize China because of the data and also the policies. However, when the things getting better, the Chinese, some overseas China, actually they are also pro to China as well. So I think based on this case, I think it's based on the case. It should be case to case. For instance, in terms of the Xinjiang problems, most of the domestic Chinese, they do not know the issues. They don't believe the issues, so they become to be pro-China. However, some overseas Chinese, maybe they are trusted. They are trusted overseas, for instance, like BBC, New York Times. So they can be critical to some domestic issues. Maybe some not to some issues. So this is the thing. I think it's based on the issues, because there are many issues.
All right. Thank you, Dachun. Good luck with your PhD, and good luck also to Jayshree with her PhD.
Yeah, thank you.
Finally, to Dr. Ararat Kostaninian. I agree. I don't find any sense in Starbucks in China for Chinese people to drink Starbucks coffee when they have fantastic tea. So this sort of Americanization I don't quite get. But I take your point about the need for cultural sensitivity and to respect other cultures. But where do you draw the line? From going too far? Are there universal values or are there not? Can it be possible that there are aspects of Chinese, that there are maybe some sensitivities that we should actually ignore because they are not respectful of just the human condition or of just human beings in general? And I ask this question also because, this is now becoming a battle, what the Chinese call Chinese wisdom versus, or a Chinese model of development, or a Chinese dream versus the Western so-called liberal model, as if there cannot be a liberal model in China. Over to you, Ararat.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, of course, there exist in universal values, as you said, because if we combine all the religions, for example, together, even the Buddhism, all the religions that we know, Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, all religions nearly say that you have to be a good man, you have to live in under the rules that the religion gives you. But still, the biggest answer the Quran or the Bible gives you is how to be a good man. This is very simple message, but how we understand it and how we perform it, that is totally different issue. For example, the US or other countries in the Western world, that they are solving all their problems militarily, or their allies. You're coming to question that these people have religion, these people have philosophers, these people have Aristotle, Kant, Plato, and etc. But why they are not using, and why they are putting those religions and philosophies into function? That is the interesting thing. I mean, what became America today after the Second World War is nothing different from the cowboyish movie they are doing, started from George W. Bush, I mean, that is surprising. Coming to China, of course, when they are talking about the wisdom, when they are talking about the family values, when all of that is good. And Xi Jinping, it's interesting that started to realize that he wrote about these ideas that cultural advancement and global cultural community must be created, especially when he talked with last July 6 with the Arab Foreign Ministry representatives. He mentioned about civilizational community. That is positive, of course, but how this will become into function, that is the question that interests me myself. They are doing some steps, I'm not denying, but at the same time, there is the accusations about this harsh, how to say, harsh police system, or if somebody, a foreigner speaks against something, either they put in jail, or we hear about these things from the media. But I don't know what is behind that real story. But anyway, people are curious about this, and they are putting this this question into attention. I mean, how fast they can move, and how can they go to not modernizing in terms of liberalizing, because today in the West, somehow you have free speech, you can bring forward your ideas, but I don't think you can do that in Harvard. I don't think you can in Harvard you can talk about Palestinian rights, or you criticize Israel. I mean, even in the West, there are some red lines that we are not mentioning about that. So overall, your question, I believe that they should work harder with the world, with other civilizations. Because what I bring you the example, the Middle East, the greater Middle East, let's say, which is Armenia is part of. Here, many people they don't have any idea about Chinese dream. They don't have any idea about how this country improved. Okay, by books. But in reality, the interest also is not too much. But when the Chinese are coming that they want to build a big project, for example, now they are going to start to build the smart city. They have these free zone projects also. But what they are doing, they are coming and straightly they are saying, we have the money is ready for the project. But my friend, money is not only the only important thing. Yes, it's crucial that we're happy that you have the money to do the project, but you have to sit down with the people and spend some time with the people. You know, Armenia is a small country, but we have one of the oldest civilizations in the world. We don't like Americans sitting on the table and signing the contract, you know. They have this civilizational weapon that they can use it positively, but unfortunately, in reality, sometimes they are doing the American way, which is I don't advise them to do. The same in the Middle East, you know, like Arabs and Islams, they have these customs to be a real man. Trust is a big issue in Arabic and Islamic culture. Sometimes in Middle East, we don't do things with agreements. A man, when they say something, that promise and the trust is there, you know. So these things can be brought together during of different civilizations, and I'm sure that friendship will be more meaningful and business will be more meaningful.
Thank you, Arad. All right, so you know, we are 13 minutes over time by my clock, by the time that Pramod gave me. Thank you all for what has been a very rich, interesting. Thank you especially for the participants. We had 7 speakers, so going a little over time is not such a bad thing. My thanks, before I hand over to Pramod, my thanks to NICE Nepal and to Pramod himself for inviting me to be the moderator. My apologies for sort of missing the time in the beginning, but it's been a very special session, I think, very interesting, and I've learned quite a bit. Thank you all once again. Over to you, Pramod.
Thank you, Dr. Jabin, distinguished panelists and dear participants. It was a wonderful session. I would like to thank our moderator for moderating this session. We'd also like to sincerely thank all our panelists for their interesting presentation. The program would not have been possible without our wonderful audience and their questions. Thank you, everyone.